The boy was quiet by nature. He did not speak much unless someone spoke to him first. He walked with his head slightly down, not because he was ashamed of who he was, but because he had learned that eye contact often invited questions he did not want to answer. His arms carried marks that were hard to miss. Pale lines crossed his skin like thin roads on a map. Some were smooth, others rough. They were scars from an accident that happened years ago, long before he understood what pain truly meant. Every morning, his mother watched him get ready for school. She noticed the way he chose long sleeves, even on warm days. She never forced him to dress differently. She knew he was trying to protect himself, not from cold, but from eyes and words. When he was younger, she had told him that scars were signs of survival, that they meant he had lived through something difficult and was still standing. He believed her at home. At school, it was harder to believe. The school building was old and loud. Hallways echoed with laughter, footsteps, and shouting voices. For most children, it was just noise. For him, it felt like a test he had to pass every day. He stayed close to walls. He sat in the same seat in class. He avoided places where groups gathered. Still, it never fully worked. At first, the comments were small. A whisper here, a stare there. Children are curious by nature, and curiosity can sometimes turn into cruelty without warning. Someone once asked if his skin burned in a fire. Another asked if it hurt to look like that. He did not answer. He just looked down at his desk and waited for the bell to ring. There was one boy in particular who watched him closely. This boy was louder than the others, more confident. He liked attention and knew how to get it. At first, he only laughed when others whispered. Then he started making jokes. Not loud ones, just loud enough for nearby students to hear. He pointed once, then twice. Each time, laughter followed. That laughter was worse than the words. The boy with scars tried to ignore it. He focused on his books. He told himself it would stop. He had heard adults say that children grow out of these things. But days passed, and it did not stop. It slowly became part of the routine, like morning announcements or homework. At home, his mother sensed something was wrong. She saw it in the way he ate less at dinner, in how he stayed longer in his room, in how he stopped talking about school altogether. When she asked gentle questions, he gave short answers. He said he was tired. He said school was fine. She knew those words were not true, but she also knew pushing too hard could make him shut down. One evening, while folding laundry, she noticed his sleeves pulled up slightly as he reached for a shirt. The scars were there, as always, but now there were new marks.
Big ones.
Small scratches that had not been there before. Her hands froze. She asked him where they came from. He hesitated, then said it was nothing. Just kids playing. She did not believe him, but she nodded anyway. That night, she lay awake long after he fell asleep. Her thoughts were loud. She wondered if she had failed him, if she should have done more to prepare him for a world that could be unkind. She remembered the hospital days after the accident, the beeping machines, the smell of clean sheets. She remembered promising herself that if he survived, she would protect him from pain. Yet here he was, hurting in a way she could not see. The next day at school, the teasing grew bolder. During a group activity, the boy with scars was asked to roll up his sleeves for a project. He hesitated. The teacher waited. Slowly, he did as asked. The room went quiet for a second. Then someone laughed. It was the same boy again. He made a comment about how it looked like the boy had been put together wrong. A few others laughed too. Some looked away, uncomfortable but silent. The teacher told them to focus on the task. The moment passed, but the damage stayed. The boy felt his face burn, not from the scars, but from shame. He wanted to disappear. He finished the activity without speaking. When the bell rang, he rushed out of the room, ignoring the calls of classmates. During lunch, he sat alone. He picked at his food, barely tasting it. Across the room, the bully talked loudly, repeating the joke, making it bigger with each telling. Every laugh felt like another stone added to a heavy load on the boy's chest. When school ended, he walked home slowly. He kicked small stones on the sidewalk. He hoped his mother would not ask about his day. He did not have the strength to explain, but she did ask. She always asked. This time, something in her voice was different, softer. He tried to answer as usual, but the words stuck. His eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for weeks. When he finally spoke, his voice shook. He told her everything. The whispers, the jokes, the laughter, the way it made him feel like his scars were all anyone could see. His mother listened without interrupting. Her heart broke with every word, but she stayed calm. When he finished, she pulled him into a quiet hug. She did not tell him to be strong. She did not tell him to ignore it. She told him she was proud of him for speaking up. She told him his scars did not define him. She told him that what others did was wrong and that it was not his fault. Still, after he went to bed, she cried alone. She felt anger, fear, and confusion all at once. She wondered if she should go to the school, if she should confront the other parents, but she also worried about making things worse for her son. She knew how quickly children could turn even crueler. The next morning, as she watched him walk into school, she noticed his shoulders were tense. He looked smaller somehow. She stayed in her car longer than usual, watching the doors. She whispered a promise to herself that she would not let this continue. Inside the school, the boy took his seat. He felt eyes on him again. He kept his sleeves down. He kept his head low. He did not know that his pain had already started a chain of events that would soon involve people he had never met. People who would be forced to face the meaning of scars, not just on skin, but on the heart. For now, he only knew one thing. School no longer felt safe, and he wondered, quietly, if it ever would again. The next week, the boy returned to school with a quiet determination. He tried to keep his head down, tried to focus on his work, tried to be invisible, but the atmosphere had shifted. The whispers were louder now, and the eyes followed him like shadows. The boy with the loud voice, the one who seemed to take pleasure in mocking others, did not miss a chance. He leaned over his desk during lessons, making small comments that others heard. A laugh here, a pointing gesture there. It was enough to make the boy's stomach twist with unease. During a group activity in art class, the teacher asked students to pair up. The boy ended up next to a new student who seemed kind and gentle. She whispered a greeting and smiled. He smiled back, hesitant, but the moment was broken when the loud boy noticed. He made a comment about how anyone would need thick skin to sit near him. The new student's smile faltered, and the boy felt a wave of embarrassment. Even in small moments of comfort, the bully managed to create fear. Lunch was worse. The cafeteria was loud, crowded, and unforgiving. He found his usual spot in the corner. His tray felt heavier than it was, and his movements were slow. Across the room, he could hear the bully laughing, telling a story about him that twisted reality and made it cruel. Other students giggled, some out of nervousness, some out of discomfort, some because they simply did not know what else to do. The boy picked at his food, barely tasting it, wishing for a place where no one could see him, no one could judge him. It was during this lunch that the worst incident happened. The loud boy decided to bring attention to the boy's scars in front of everyone. He leaned back in his chair and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Hey everyone, look at him. You can see every little mark. Betty's scared of everything." The cafeteria fell silent for a second. Then, a few children laughed nervously, trying to join in, while others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. The boy felt his face burn with shame. He wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air. He held his tray tightly and left, spilling a little food in his rush. At home, the boy's mother could see immediately that something had gone wrong. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were downcast. He did not speak as he walked in, simply sitting down at the kitchen table and staring at his hands. She waited, not pushing him, letting him find his words. Finally, his voice broke as he recounted the day's events. She listened, her heart aching with every word. She did not interrupt, only held him and let him speak until the words were gone. The mother knew that something had to change. She tried talking to the school first, reaching out to the teacher and explaining the situation carefully. She did not accuse anyone. She spoke of her son's feelings and the impact that teasing had on him. The teacher promised to keep an eye on the situation, to intervene if necessary. But the boy still felt the weight of the world each day. And promises from adults did not erase the embarrassment he carried. Days went by, and the bully's behavior escalated. It was no longer quiet comments or whispers. He had begun to make public jokes in the hallways, sometimes even during assemblies. One morning, the boy with scars was called to the front of the classroom to answer a question. The loud boy made a snide remark about how anyone could guess he was different, how everyone could see the scars like a map of shame. The classroom went quiet. The teacher looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The boy wished he could disappear. His mother noticed him becoming quieter at home, withdrawing from activities he once enjoyed. He stopped talking about friends or school projects. He stopped drawing, a hobby that used to bring him joy. She knew he was carrying a heavy burden, one that no one else could lift for him. Every night, she stayed by his side a little longer, listening, holding, and reminding him that scars were not a measure of worth. But she knew the world outside their home was harsher, and she feared what would come next. One afternoon, the boy's mother decided to teach him a simple lesson. They went to the park together. She let him run, climb, and play as freely as possible, reminding him of strength, courage, and resilience. For a moment, he forgot the taunts and the laughter. He smiled genuinely for the first time in days. But even in those moments of joy, the shadows of school waited for him. Reminders that the battle was not over at school, the bullying continued. And the boy began to notice that some classmates looked at him differently. Some seemed hesitant, unsure whether to include him or avoid him. The loud boy thrived on this uncertainty. He whispered comments just loud enough for nearby students to hear, reinforcing the idea that being different was something to mock. The boy felt trapped in a cycle he could not break. Then, one day, a small change occurred. During a math lesson, the loud boy tried to make a joke, but one student, a quiet girl, spoke up. "Stop it," she said firmly. "It's not funny." Others nodded in agreement, and for the first time the boy felt a glimmer of relief. He realized he was not entirely alone. There were people willing to stand up, even in small ways. But he also knew that courage from others could not erase his scars or the memories of humiliation. The loud boy noticed the resistance and became angrier. He intensified his teasing, sometimes following the boy with scars down the hall, sometimes making cruel jokes during recess. Each day felt heavier than the last. The boy tried to remain calm, tried to stay invisible, but he was only human. Tears came easily, hiding in bathrooms or behind corners where no one could see. He questioned himself, wondering if he had done something to deserve this. Forgetting that the fault was never his mother saw the change. She saw the way he held himself in the car, the silence between them during drives, the reluctance to talk. She knew she had to act. She scheduled a meeting with the school principal, explaining the bullying in detail and requesting more direct intervention. The principal listened, nodded, and promised to speak with the teachers and the students involved. Still, she knew that promises on paper could not undo the daily humiliation. That night, she sat beside him in bed. She held his hand and told him a story about her own struggles when she was younger, about moments when she felt small and overlooked, about how she learned that true strength came not from hiding, but from facing life despite the fear. He listened quietly, absorbing her words, finding comfort in the warmth of her voice. She did not offer magic solutions, only empathy, understanding, and love. Over the next few days, the boy noticed subtle shifts. Some classmates avoided the loud boy when he tried to tease. Some teachers watched more closely. Still, the scars on his arms felt heavier in his mind, a constant reminder of vulnerability. He wondered if anyone could ever truly understand how it felt to be singled out for something beyond his control. Yet amidst the humiliation, there were moments of kindness. Glimmers of hope that perhaps things could change. The loud boy, meanwhile, grew restless. He could sense that his power over others was waning, that some students no longer laughed at his jokes. This frustrated him. He tried new ways to assert himself, but the boy with scars remained quiet, enduring and in small ways resilient. Each day of surviving the teasing became a small victory, though he did not feel victorious yet at home. The boy's mother noticed that he started to speak more, slowly, hesitantly, about his day. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and encouragement. They talked about coping strategies, about finding friends who understood, and about ways to stay strong when others tried to tear him down. These conversations became lifelines, helping him navigate a world that often felt cruel and unyielding. One afternoon, after another difficult day at school, the boy came home with a small smile. It was fleeting, but it was there. He had found a friend, a quiet ally who did not laugh at his scars, who offered a word of kindness when it was needed most. The boy realized that even in the harshest environments, there were people willing to see beyond appearances, willing to recognize the person rather than the scars. Though the bullying was not over, and the days remained challenging, the boy began to understand that he was not alone. His scars were part of him, yes, but they were also symbols of survival and endurance. And even in the face of humiliation, small acts of kindness and courage could shine through, offering hope in a world that sometimes seemed dark. And so, the boy faced each day with a quiet determination, holding on to the moments of light and learning, slowly but surely, that he had the strength to endure, to survive, and perhaps one day, to rise above the cruelty that had marked his path. The boy's life continued in its difficult rhythm. Each day, he went to school with a mix of fear and determination. The whispers, the stares, and the occasional cruel laughter had become part of the routine. Still, he kept trying to focus on the little things that brought him comfort, drawing quietly in the margins of his notebook, finishing his homework early so he could read a favorite book, and spending a few moments in the library where silence was a shield. Meanwhile, the bully's father began noticing a change in his own child at home. His son had always been loud and confident, but recently he seemed restless, aggressive, and unusually proud of small acts of meanness. The father could feel a tension in the house that had not been there before, a quiet undercurrent of something wrong. He asked questions, gentle at first, hoping to understand. The answers were evasive, brushed off with laughter or shrugged off as nothing important. But he was not convinced. One evening, the father called his son into the living room. The house was quiet, the hum of the heater filling the silence. He asked him about his day, about school, and about the friends he spent time with. The son answered vaguely, avoiding eye contact, and eventually tried to leave the room. But the father stopped him. Calmly, he asked again, this time with a tone that could not be ignored. Something was wrong, and the son could sense it. Finally, after a long pause, the boy admitted what had been happening at school. He spoke with pride, but also with a hint of excitement, detailing the teasing and the reactions of his classmates, focusing especially on the boy with scars. He laughed at some parts, proud that he had caused embarrassment, but the father's silence was heavier than any reprimand. The laughter faded as the weight of his father's attention settled on him. The father's heart sank, not only because of what his son had done, but also because of the deeper lesson it reflected. He remembered moments from his own youth, moments when he had been cruel without thinking, when he had laughed at others to feel powerful or accepted. He saw a reflection of himself in his son, and it frightened him. He knew he could not let this continue unchecked. The next morning, the father made a decision. He contacted the school and requested a meeting with the principal, teachers, and parents of the children involved. He did not do this to accuse or shame. He did it to understand the situation fully and to take responsibility. At home, he spoke to his son with honesty, explaining that causing pain to others was unacceptable, and that real strength was shown through kindness and understanding, not through cruelty. At school, the father asked to speak with the principal privately first. He listened as the principal explained the events, the teasing, the humiliation, and the emotional toll it had taken on the boy with scars. The father's heart ached as he imagined a child, any child, feeling the shame and pain his son had inflicted. He realized that while some parents might react with anger, denial, or dismissal, he had a choice. He could guide his son toward understanding, or he could allow the cruelty to continue unchecked. The meeting with the teachers and parents was set for later in the week. Until then, the father focused on preparing his son, not with threats or punishment alone, but with conversations about empathy, about what it meant to hurt someone, and about the power of listening. He shared a story from his own past, a moment when he had been careless with words and actions, a time when he had hurt someone unintentionally, but deeply. He wanted his son to understand that the pain of others was not abstract. It was real, tangible, and lasting. At home, the boy with scars continued his quiet life, unaware of the storm building outside. He went to school, carried his books carefully, and avoided the loud boy when possible. He did his best to remain unseen, hoping that the teasing would pass, that the world would recognize his quiet strength and leave him in peace. But deep down, he could feel the tension growing. Something was about to change. The day of the meeting arrived. The father of the bully walked into the school with a calm but purposeful demeanor. Teachers, parents, and students gathered in the small conference room. The father began by explaining his perspective, acknowledging that he had learned about the situation only recently, and that he took full responsibility for guiding his child. He spoke about empathy, about understanding the consequences of one's actions, and about the importance of kindness. He emphasized that bullying was never acceptable and that he expected his son to face the consequences and learn from the experience. The father asked his son to speak, not to excuse his behavior, but to listen. The boy with scars was invited to share his story, to explain the impact of the teasing and humiliation on his daily life, his feelings, and his sense of self. The room was silent, every ear attentive. The boy with scars spoke quietly but firmly, describing the fear, the pain, and the embarrassment he had endured. He talked about the sleepless nights, the tears hidden in corners, and the way he had felt small and invisible. He spoke with courage, knowing that the words themselves were a form of strength. The bully listened, at first shifting uncomfortably, then gradually stilling as the reality of his actions sank in. He had never considered the lasting effects of his jokes, the depth of the emotional wounds he had inflicted. His father's steady gaze reminded him that this was not a game, that the consequences were real, and that the lesson had to be understood, not ignored. After the boy finished speaking, the father guided his son to apologize, not with a simple, hollow statement, but by acknowledging the pain he had caused, by listening, and by promising to do better. The words were awkward at first, but genuine. The room felt heavy with emotion, a mix of relief, tension, and hope. For the first time, the boy with scars saw a flicker of accountability, a sign that change was possible, that adults could step in, and that those who had caused pain could also learn empathy. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose. Teachers agreed to monitor interactions closely. Parents pledged to support both children. The bully's father made it clear that this was a turning point, not just a temporary fix. The boy with scars returned home that day feeling lighter, knowing that someone else was standing up for him in ways that went beyond mere words. He still carried the memories of humiliation, but now there was hope that the cycle could end. At home that evening, he spoke to his mother about the meeting, about how someone had finally listened, and how he felt that perhaps he could face school again without fear consuming every step. She held him, proud of his courage, and reminded him that scars were marks of survival, not weakness. Together, they discussed ways to cope, to find allies among classmates, and to maintain confidence even when others failed to show kindness. Meanwhile, the bully's father continued to work with his son, teaching lessons about respect, empathy, and responsibility. They discussed not only what had happened, but also why it was wrong, the effect on others, and the way to make amends. Slowly, the bully began to understand that power did not come from making others feel small, but from standing up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable. The boy with scars noticed small changes at school. The loud boy's teasing lessened, and when incidents occurred, teachers intervened quickly. Some classmates began to reach out, offering small gestures of friendship and inclusion. It was not perfect, and the scars did not disappear, but the environment began to feel slightly safer, more human. For the first time in weeks, the boy realized that being seen for who he was, not just for his scars, was possible. The father's intervention had created a ripple effect. Not only did his own son begin to change, but the school culture slowly shifted. The lessons learned that day went beyond punishment. They were about empathy, accountability, and the power of adults to guide children toward understanding. And for the boy with scars, it was a reminder that courage could take many forms, in speaking up, in surviving, and in trusting that someone would eventually hear his story. The days after the meeting brought subtle changes at school. The boy with scars felt a small sense of relief. The loud boy no longer mocked him as openly, and some teachers made a point of watching more closely. Still, the weight of previous humiliation lingered, and every step in the hallways carried a shadow of the past. The boy did his best to focus on studies, on drawing, and on moments of quiet peace, but deep down he knew the scars were not just on his skin, they were on his heart. One morning, the bully's father arrived at the school with a sense of purpose. He had asked for a special gathering, one that included students, teachers, and parents. There was tension in the air. Students whispered, unsure what to expect. Teachers exchanged curious glances. Even the parents felt a mixture of concern and hope. The father's expression was calm, firm, and serious, signaling that this meeting would be different from ordinary school discussions. When the assembly began, the father addressed the group. He spoke quietly, but with a steady confidence that captured attention. He explained that he had recently learned of his son's behavior and of the emotional pain it had caused. He did not excuse his son, nor did he speak in anger. Instead, he shared a personal story, a memory from his own childhood. He told the students about a time when he, too, had been careless with words, had laughed at someone different, and had caused someone to feel small and unwanted. His voice was steady, but his words carried weight. The room grew silent, each listener absorbing the gravity of what was being said. Then he addressed his own son directly. He did not raise his voice. He did not shout or humiliate. Instead, he explained that true courage was shown not in mocking others, but in understanding, apologizing, and making amends. He asked his son to step forward and speak to the boy with scars, not with a prepared apology, but by listening. By acknowledging the pain he had caused, and by showing genuine remorse, the boy with scars felt his heart race. He had never imagined a situation like this. The room was full, yet all eyes seemed to focus on him. He felt fear, uncertainty, and a strange flicker of hope all at once. The loud boy hesitated, looking at his father, then at the boy he had tormented. Slowly, he began to speak, stammering at first, words heavy with discomfort and honesty. He admitted that he had made cruel jokes, that he had laughed at someone who did not deserve it, and that he now understood the harm he had caused. He listened as the boy with scars spoke about his own experiences, about the embarrassment, the isolation, and the fear he had endured. The atmosphere was tense, yet filled with something profound, understanding. Students who had laughed or turned away now witnessed a rare moment of accountability. The boy with scars, though nervous, felt a weight lifting. He spoke clearly, describing not only the pain, but also the resilience it had taken to endure it. He did not hold anger, but he was honest about the hurt. The room remained silent, the weight of truth settling over everyone present. After the exchange, the father guided his son to offer a full apology. Not just words, but a promise to do better, to be mindful, and to treat others with respect. The apology was sincere, awkward, and human. It was a step toward reconciliation, and for the first time, the boy with scars felt a glimmer of justice, not in punishment, but in understanding and accountability. The teacher spoke next. They praised both children for their courage and emphasized the importance of empathy and respect in all interactions. They reminded the students that words can heal or hurt, and that standing by and doing nothing is as harmful as actively participating in cruelty. Parents nodded, some quietly reflecting on their own children's behavior. Realizing that guidance and intervention were ongoing responsibilities, the boy with scars walked home that day, feeling lighter. The burden of humiliation had not vanished, but he sensed that the cycle of cruelty could end. For the first time, he believed that being different was not a flaw, that scars were a testament to survival, and that some adults would step in to ensure fairness and understanding at home. He told his mother everything that had happened. He described the assembly, the father's words, the apology, and the feeling of being heard. She listened with tears in her eyes, holding him close, proud of his courage. They talked about the lessons learned, about the power of empathy, and about the importance of standing up for oneself, even in the face of fear. The mother reminded him that scars were symbols of strength, that the boy he was inside mattered more than what anyone else saw on the outside. The bully's father continued his guidance at home. He did not stop at a single conversation. He spoke with his son about empathy, kindness, and responsibility every day. He encouraged him to reflect on the consequences of actions, to consider the feelings of others, and to understand that respect is earned through behavior, not assumed by status or confidence. Slowly, the loud boy began to change. He asked questions, listened attentively, and learned that making amends was not a punishment, but a path to becoming a better person. The school environment began to shift as well. Students who had participated in teasing began to reflect on their behavior. Teachers noticed small acts of kindness and support emerging among classmates. The boy with scars started to feel safer, not because the scars disappeared, but because the people around him were learning to see beyond them. He began to raise his hand in class, to speak more openly, and to participate in group activities. His confidence grew slowly, day by day, reinforced by genuine empathy and support. One afternoon, during recess, the boy with scars found himself in a situation he would have avoided before. A group of students approached him, including some who had laughed at the bullying in the past. They invited him to play a game, not as a form of pity, but with genuine inclusion. He hesitated, then joined in. For the first time in months, he laughed freely, feeling the warmth of acceptance rather than the chill of judgment. The experience was small but transformative. A reminder that change was possible, and that scars, while visible, did not define his ability to connect with others. The father of the bully observed these changes with quiet satisfaction. His son was learning, growing, and beginning to understand the true meaning of respect. The boy with scars was thriving in small but significant ways, and the school was slowly becoming a place where empathy mattered more than mockery. It was a lesson not only for the children involved, but for everyone present. That accountability, honesty, and compassion could reshape even the most difficult situations. That evening, the boy with scars reflected on the day. He felt a sense of pride, not in triumph over others, but in his own endurance, courage, and willingness to speak the truth. He understood that the road ahead would still have challenges, but he also knew that he was no longer facing it alone. Adults, peers, and even those who had caused pain were beginning to understand the power of empathy and the importance of human connection. At home, his mother celebrated the small victories with him. They drew together, laughed, and spoke openly about feelings and experiences. She reminded him that scars were not a mark of weakness, but a symbol of survival, resilience, and growth. And for the first time in a long while, the boy felt a sense of belonging, a quiet assurance that he could face each day with courage and hope. In the weeks that followed the assembly, life at school began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. The boy with scars continued to face challenges, but the bullying had decreased significantly. The loud boy, guided by his father's lessons, had started to behave differently. He no longer sought to humiliate others, and when small incidents occurred, he quickly corrected himself. The boy with scars noticed these changes, and although it did not erase the past, it gave him hope for the future. The boy began to approach school with a quiet confidence. He still kept his head down in certain situations, and he still chose long sleeves some days. Not out of shame, but as a personal preference. He realized that his scars were a part of his story, and that story was his to embrace. Teachers noticed the change in his demeanor and encouraged him to participate more in class discussions. Slowly he began raising his hand, answering questions, and sharing ideas. Each time he spoke, he felt a small surge of pride. Friendships began to form as well. The quiet girl who had previously stood up for him became a close ally. Other students, inspired by the assembly and the father's lesson, reached out with small gestures of kindness. A smile in the hallway, an invitation to work together on a project, or a word of encouragement during lunch. The boy with scars accepted these gestures cautiously at first, but gradually he learned to trust and to enjoy the company of others. He discovered that being different did not mean being alone. At home, the mother watched these changes with relief and pride. She encouraged her son to express his feelings, to share his experiences, and to reflect on the growth he had achieved. They talked openly about fear, courage, and resilience. She reminded him that scars were a symbol of survival, a mark of strength, a reminder that he had endured challenges that many could not imagine. Her words helped him internalize the lessons learned at school and at home, giving him the confidence to face the world with his head held a little higher each day. The bully's father continued to mentor his son. He spoke about empathy, responsibility, and the importance of understanding the consequences of one's actions. He encouraged his son to make amends, not just with words, but through consistent behavior. The loud boy began to volunteer for small tasks at school, helping classmates when they struggled and offering support during group activities. Over time, these acts of kindness became genuine, a reflection of the growth he had achieved through accountability and guidance. The boy with scars noticed the transformation and felt a sense of closure. Not through revenge, but through the realization that change was possible. He saw that even those who had caused pain could learn, could grow, and could contribute positively to the community. This understanding gave him a new perspective on life and on the human capacity for growth and empathy. One day, the boy with scars was asked to participate in a school presentation about resilience and overcoming challenges. He was nervous, unsure if he could speak in front of a large group, but he accepted the opportunity. When he stood before his classmates, he spoke about his journey, the struggles he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. He shared the story of the assembly, the apology, and the changes that had followed. His voice trembled at first, but as he continued, he found strength in the words, in the support of his friends, and in the knowledge that he had endured and survived. The students listened attentively, some with tears in their eyes, others with thoughtful expressions. The boy with scars spoke not to seek pity, but to inspire understanding. He explained that differences should be respected, that empathy could heal wounds, and that courage came in many forms, including the courage to speak the truth and to endure hardships. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, not only for his bravery, but for the lesson he had imparted. After the presentation, several students approached him to share their own stories of struggle, teasing, or fear. He listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and understanding. For the first time, he realized that his scars, once a source of shame, had become a bridge connecting him with others. His experiences allowed him to empathize, to guide, and to support. Turning his past pain into a source of strength and inspiration, the loud boy observed from a distance, reflecting on his own journey. He had learned humility, empathy, and responsibility. Watching the boy with scars share his story, he understood the impact of his previous actions and felt a sincere desire to continue improving. He approached the boy with scars afterward, offering a genuine smile and words of acknowledgement for the courage he had shown. The interaction was simple, yet powerful, marking a turning point for both boys. The school environment continued to improve. Teachers noticed that students were more supportive of each other, more mindful of words and actions, and more willing to intervene when witnessing bullying. The ripple effect of the assembly and the father's lesson extended beyond the immediate individuals involved, influencing the culture of the school and fostering a sense of community and compassion at home. The boy with scars and his mother celebrated the small victories. They spent time together, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. They talked about the future, about dreams, and about the possibilities that awaited him. She reminded him that while scars may remain, they did not define him. His resilience, kindness, and courage defined him. The boy began to embrace life more fully. He participated in sports, joined a small art club, and engaged more with classmates. He discovered joy in creativity, friendship, and learning. His scars were no longer a source of shame, but a symbol of the strength he had cultivated through adversity. Each day he felt a little stronger, a little braver, and a little more confident in his own skin. The bully's father continued to support his son's growth. He encouraged reflection, conversation, and empathy, ensuring that lessons learned were reinforced daily. The loud boy, now more thoughtful and aware, continued to develop genuine kindness and understanding. The relationship between the two boys, once marked by fear and humiliation, gradually evolved into one of mutual respect, if not friendship. The boy with scars learned to forgive, not for the sake of the other boy alone, but for his own peace of mind. In time, the school recognized the journey both boys had undertaken. Teachers and students spoke of the assembly as a turning point, a moment when empathy, accountability, and understanding reshaped the environment. Parents acknowledged the importance of guidance, involvement, support, in helping children navigate the challenges of growing up. The story of scars, humiliation, and the father's intervention became a lesson in human resilience, compassion, and growth. The boy with scars realized that life would continue to bring challenges, but he was no longer defined by them. His scars were a testament to survival, his experiences a source of strength, and his resilience a model for others. He learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it, to endure, and to grow. The lessons of empathy, accountability, and kindness had shaped his journey and would guide him for years to come. In the end, the boy understood that life was not measured by the marks on one's body, but by the strength of character, the capacity for empathy, and the courage to overcome adversity. The scars remained, but they no longer held the power to define him. Instead, they symbolized the journey from pain to understanding, from humiliation to respect, and from isolation to connection. He had survived, learned, and grown, ready to face the world with confidence, courage, and hope.